Greetings from Albania. I am Linda Mëniku, University Professor at the Department of Linguistics, University of Tirana. The topic of this presentation is street names in Tirana. The purpose of this study is to analyze the social-spatial transformation process in the capital of Albania, Tirana. Tirana has transformed itself from the capital of an isolated communist country to a metropolitan city where the past and the present are intertwined. The radical political, social, economic, and cultural changes that transformed Albania in general, and especially the capital of Albania as a symbol of change, have also transformed the urban space. This transformation of the urban space is reflected also in the street names. Observing the names of the streets of Tirana will support the general idea of Tirana as a vibrant city that can serve through the names of the streets and places as a historical, art, and cultural guide of Albania to Albanians and foreigners. Tirana historical background. Archaeological data trace the existence of human society in the region of Tirana since the late Paleolithic period. According to Frasheri, in the first millennium, the region of Tirana belonged to the territory of Illyrian tribes of Parthenia. Under the Roman Empire administrative organization of the 4th century AD by Diocletian, the region of Tirana was included under the province of Epirus Nova. With the division of the Roman Empire in 395, the province of Epirus Nova was included in the Roman Empire of East, the Byzantine Empire. Under the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, in the province of Epirus Nova, 33 new castles were built, 26 were reconstructed. 10 of these castles were in the region of Tirana. The most ancient one is the castle of Dorsi, 7 to 5 century BC. In the list of these castles built or reconstructed under Emperor Justinian is included the castle of Turkanos, that has attracted the interest of the Croatian scholar Milan Šuflaj, who thinks that this is related to the name of Tirana. According to Frasheri, if the archaeological work will continue and will prove the existence of the castle of the late antiquity in the present heart of the capital of Albania, this could prove the thesis of the Croatian medievalist Šuflaj. In 1272, Tirana was included in the kingdom of Albania. Then in the 14th century, with the creation of the Principate of Kartopia, Tirana became part of it and had some stability. In 1419, Tirana was included in the Vilayet of Gruja. According to Bakiu, during the historical period of Skanderbeg, Tirana was included in the Principate of Skanderbeg. Marin Barleti, 1510, mentions in this period two Tirana. Tirana Mavet, the Tirana Vogel, the big and small Tirana. Skanderbeg seemed to have lost his control of Tirana to Ottoman troops around the year 1466 to 1467. Since late 16th century, the field of Tirana was a major road for the caravans. The ancient road of Agnatia became an active road from Duras. Other roads connected Tirana with Dibra, Elbasan, other cities in Albania. The history of Tirana as a modern city began in 1614 when Suleiman Pasha Bargini, a rich fugitive from the village of Mulek, built 4 main buildings: a mosque of Turkish bath, a bakery, some inns, and these buildings became the center of the new town. Tirana was born as a city where the 2 main activities were craftsmanship and trade. In the beginning of the 18th century, Tirana was a kaza with 2,200 houses. According to the Austro-Hungarian registration of the population in 1917, Tirana was the center of the prefecture and had around 10,251 inhabitants, mostly Muslims. According to a map compiled by the Austrians in 1916, some streets of the Old Bazaar are named after the crafts and trades housed in the Old Bazaar. The street of the shoemakers, the street of the blacksmiths, of the silver, and of the bazaar. On February 9, 1920, the Congress of Lushnja proclaimed Tirana as the provisional capital of Albania. Tirana took its final status as the capital of Albania on January 31, 1925. In 1920, when Tirana became the provisional capital of Albania, it had around 11,334 inhabitants. The city had still 6 neighborhoods. According to the planimetry of Tirana of March 26, 1921, all the streets of Tirana are in 2-part form, the indicator of the type of street and the individual name. Rruga Durrësit, the street of Durrës; Rruga Topias, the street of Topia. Many streets of Tirana in 1921 had their traditional names of places they led, even though in some cases the city was many kilometers away. Rruga Kavai, the street of Kavai, of Durrës, of Gruja, of Tibra, and Elbasan. Some streets were named after the areas of the streets connected. Some streets were named after famous or distinguished individuals, people, or families. Occupational street names were also common. In Tirana, some street names of Tirana in 1921 denoted locations. Some street characteristics, flowers, and one street was named after the Independence Day of Albania, November 28th. In 1921, Tirana had 6 squares. 2 of them were named after the national hero of Albania, Skanderbeg, and one after the founder of Tirana, Suleiman Pasha. In the 20s, and there are 4 urban plans for Tirana developed mainly by Italian architects. In 1923, 1925, 1921, 1928, and the last one was in 1929, and this was the plan that was actually revised and finalized. Main streets of Tirana during the monarchy that was proclaimed on September 1st, 1928. The main boulevard was named after the Albanian monarch King Zog. One street was named after his father and changed from the old street Rruga Durrësit to Xhemal Pasha, King Zog's father. One street changed the name from the first one was Rruga Rruga Durrësit changed to Nana Mbretëresh, the Queen Mother, and another street was named after Benito Mussolini. Rruga Kotrokota was named after the Prime Minister of Albania. Rruga Republika, the street of the Republic, changed first to Rruga Mbretërore, or the Royal Street, and then after the marriage of the King Zog to the monarch Geraldine, was named after her, Mbretëresha Geraldine, Queen Geraldine. King Zog ruled the country from 1928 to April 1939 when Italian fascist troops invaded the country. Albania became part of the Italian Empire, and Victor Emmanuel III was crowned King of Albania. The Italian administration of Albania during the Second World War collapsed in September 1943 when German troops occupied the country. During the Italian occupation, the street names changed again. The main boulevard, Zogu I, was changed to Vittorio Emanuele, which is the Italian king. Rruga Dibras, the Dibra Street that first changed to the king's monarch father, changed again and was named after the hero of Albania. Rruga Durrësit, that was first named the Queen Mother, changed again to the Prince of Piedmont, and this is referring to the Italian royal house of Savoyards, who use this term for their present references. Rruga Republika, the street of Republic that changed first to the Royal Street and to Queen Geraldine Street, changed again to Queen Elena after the wife of Victor Emmanuel, the King of Italy. So after the description of the street names in Albania until the end of the Second World War, based on the data provided by previous study, we'll continue now with the data analysis of the street names in Tirana in 2 important historic periods, 1945 to 1990, 1991 to 2020. This is the first study for the street names in Albania during this period using the data kindly provided from Tirana municipality. Would like to take this moment to express our gratitude to Tirana municipality staff for their support of this research study. The list of the streets provided from 1945-1990 includes 190 street names. We couldn't find information about the names of 19 streets, therefore we will analyze in this study 171 street names using statistical data. The list of the streets provided from 1991 to 2020 includes over 1,000 street names. We will give a general review of the street names trend during this period. So, political situation, 1945-1990. Between 1941 and 1944, communist partisans and nationalist groups fought Italian and German troops. And after the communist resistance, the German troops withdrew from the capital of Albania, Tirana, in November 1944. Afterwards, the partisan troops moved to the capital, establishing a provisional government. In January 1945, tribunals began to condemn thousands of war criminals and enemies of the people to death or to prison. Communist regime begins to nationalize industry, transportation for investors. King Zog and his followers were barred from returning to Albania by Herod's communist regime. The People's Republic of Albania was born officially on January 11, 1946, but the communist government had already created official titles for the honorific system on July 9, 1945. In September 1945, the Council of Ministers decided to change the street names of Tirana. All the new names honored the partisans and martyrs of the World War II who gave their life for the liberation of Albania. From 1945 to 1990, according to Iacono, the conclusion of the Liberation War, as in many other contexts in Eastern Europe, represents the main revolutionary event of Albania. It is relatively difficult to draw a dividing line between the outcome of the liberation war and the overthrowing of the previous regime. Although culture did not represent an immediate priority in the aftermath of the World War II, establishing an ideological hegemony quickly became very important for the regime. Its development through cultural policies, however, was not a chronologically coherent phenomenon concentrated in the immediate aftermath of the liberation or revolution. Rather, it occurred throughout the history of the communist Albania. It is certainly possible to recognize the urgency of making the liberation struggle the foundational narrative of the emerging communist state in the proliferation of exhibitions, museums, and house museums connected to this period and related episodes and key figures. The celebration of the Communist Party was often coupled with celebration of resistance, with many streets commemorating the heroes of people, martyrs, and partisans. So this is our data analysis. Heroes of People, Second World War, 35 streets were named to honor the heroes of people. 23 of them were named after the martyrs of the World War II, so around 13.4%. 12 streets honored heroes of the people, important figures of pre- and post-war. 2 of them were figures of communism. 4 of them were named after communists who lost their lives after the Second World War, and only 6 streets were named after important political figures before the World War II. 42 street names honor the partisans of World War II, the martyrs of this war, 25%. 9 streets of Tirana were named after people who lost their lives in the massacre of February 4th, 1944 from the Nazis during the Second World War. In the extermination camp of Pristina on October 23rd, 1944, were shot 104 convicts in honor to these people. 7 streets of Tirana, 4% have their names. 5 streets commemorate important events of Albania in different periods. 2 events are related to the anti-fascist movement. 3 streets names commemorate the martyrs of the Second World War. 1 street commemorates the martyrs of the nation. 1 street the martyrs of Fekian during communism. 10 streets, around 6%, were named after important figures of the history of Albania in the Middle Ages. 3 of them are related to Skanderbeg, honoring his wife, his father, and his advisor. 4 streets are named after early Albanian writers, and 2 streets are named after important rulers not from Tirana. 23 streets, 12%, were named after important writers, scholars, educators, diplomats, warriors, religious people of the Albanian Renaissance who contributed for the national awakening of the Albanians in the 19th century. After 1945, all the old street names of Tirana changed. The street names related to the family names of Tirana were replaced by the names of martyrs, partisans, important figures of Albanian history. Anyway, to honor the contribution of patriots of Tirana, 11 streets, 6%, were named after important figures of the city who contributed for the independence of Albania, and especially for their leading role in opening the schools to teach Albanian. 1 street honors the founder of the city, Suleiman Pasha. 11th Street honored famous Albanians of different periods of the history of Albania who lived abroad. 2 of them were famous architects under Ottoman Empire. 4 of them were from the Albanian community in Italy. 1 of them from the Albanian community in Greece, and only 1 was an important woman of the Renaissance period. 2 streets are named after 2 important days: the Independence Day of Albania. This is the name of the street that never changed even during the occupation and during communism. And also the 5th of May, that was named to honor the Martyrs' Day of Albania, remembering the death of the Kemal Sapa communist on May 5th, 1942. Only 3 streets are named after people who contributed to the years of communism. 3 streets are referred to specific locations. 1 street relates to the student street behind the Faculty of Engineering Albania, and 1 street commemorates a fundamental value of Albanians, Besa. As a conclusion, the streets commemorating the foundational narrative of the communist state, the name streets, is around 57.9%, so 60%, almost 60%. From 1991 to 2020, the political situation, the fall of communism in Albania started in December 1990 with student demonstration in the capital of Albania. The first oppositional party was founded on December 12, 1990. Political prisoners were freed in 1991. The Democratic Party won the first democratic elections in March 1992. In 1993, the son of King Zolvi was permitted to enter Albania for the first time after April 7, 1939. So the Albanian election in 1992 was the first local election held in Albania. This election was won by the Democratic Party. The population of Albania has changed during the last 30 years. Current population 42. Instat is around 2.8. The data are from 2019. About 1/3 of the population lives in the prefecture of Tirana, the most populated prefecture in the country. First street names started in 1993. Even though the street names changed during the communism, the name of the old streets of Durrës, Tibra, Kava, and Elbasan never changed for the population of Tirana. These street names were in use. So the first decision after the election of 1992 was to change the names of the street back to their old names. In the year 2000, some street names were named after the Tirana family who lived in those streets, using the names people use in their everyday life. When the communists came to power, the name of King Zoglu Boulevard was changed to Boulevard Stalin until December 21st, 1990. On April 2000, Tirana Whole Council decided to rename it the Boulevard Zoglu Pipar Zoglu first. There are a lot of streets honoring Tirana families, but also families from other cities who have contributed during the history of Albania. Street names honoring the mayors of the city are 11. 4 of these mayors were considered enemies of the communist regime. They were arrested, imprisoned, and lost their life during the communism. 2 of them are mayors from the communist regime. Many streets of Tirana honor former political prisoners or victims of communism, politicians, writers, religious people, former partisans, and members of the Communist Party, representing different regions of Albania. Some streets were named after important figures of the communist regime. More streets were named after the years of people during the period 1991-2020 than in communism. There is also a list of people from the Renaissance period who were honored, naming the streets of Tirana with their names. A long list of actors, movie directors, is the honoring the famous people of all Albania, not only Tirana. Also, a list of writers, translators of different periods of it, and important figures of the history of Albania are honored by naming the streets of Tirana with their names. Opera singers, folk singers from all over Albania also have their names in the street of Tirana. Only one of them actually was a famous folk singer of Tirana. All the others are from different regions. Her name is Fitneta Reja. Also, streets of Tirana honors painters, photographers from the Middle Ages to present period. Soccer players of Tirana Soccer Club are also in the list of the street of Tirana. Doctors from all over Albania who contributed during the communism period are also honored by naming the streets of Tirana with their names. There are also some streets that are named after the important patriots, artists, scholars from Kosovo. One of them is the most important figure of the Kosovo Liberation War, Adem Yashari. And the leader of Kosovo, Ibrahim Rugova, actually there are 2 streets named after him. Final conclusions. Observing the names of the streets of Tirana, we can conclude that the radical political, social, economic, cultural change that transformed Albania in general, especially the capital of Albania as a symbol of change, have also to transfer the urban space. The streets of Tirana can serve as a historic art and cultural guide of Tirana, of Albania, where the past and the present are intertwined. Street names of Tirana honor the victims of communism and communist leaders from all over Albania. Street names of Tirana honor the writers, educators, scholars, and artists of this country and of the Albanian nation from the ancient periods to present times. Street names of Tirana honor the martyrs of Second World War and the martyrs of democracy. Street names of Tirana honor religious people of different religions, stating their religion harmony of Albania as an important feature of the Albanian society. Street names of Tirana honor the doctors, engineers, sportists from all over the country. The street names of Tirana are a testimony of all political and historical changes of Albania. Thank you for your attention. Hope you enjoyed this short trip to the capital of Albania, Tirana, and hope to meet you one day here.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Does anyone have questions? You can paste them into the Ask a Question, put them in the chat, and I'll read them aloud, either for Linda or for any of our presenters. Linda, I have a question. So I understand from your presentation the motivations for changing the names, right? Like why they would choose to change them. Is there any justification you could find or trends for which street names were changed? So which existing street names, so how did they decide which existing street names to change once they wanted to give a new name to a street? Does that make sense?
This is, thank you so much. This is a very good question. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Actually, very few streets have changed their names. Tirana has become a very big municipality. They are including now all what we consider like villages previously. So all the street names are spreading outside of Tirana. So they are not renaming the streets. So the streets still have the old names of partisans or martyrs, but only they have renamed, as I mentioned, the main 4 streets of the city. The main boulevard has changed, but all the other streets are the new streets that are opened. Like the Tirana has become really a very big city because they say 1/3 of the population, but is over the half of the population in Tirana. So, and the question is very interesting and good because actually I see important people of Albania, their names are in the streets, like in small streets somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you don't understand why the most important poet of Albania, his name is used for a street somewhere like kilometers away, and then you have an unknown person in the center of the city. So I don't think it's a real plan in the way they are doing it. I think it's mostly, it depends on how the advisors and the city councils thinks of that. So when I was reviewing all this, I saw that a lot of old names of the streets of Tirana are not used. So maybe instead of thinking of on how to name the streets of the Tirana, I didn't have time to include the information because there were like over 1,000 street names. So there were painters from Kosovo, like musicians from Kosovo, people don't know in Albania. So it was the first time I saw. I'm very happy that these streets have their names, but they could use also names of old names of the city, so they can bring these names back. So I don't think it's a real plan. Tirana nowadays is a very chaotic urban planning, and I think the way it is built, also this is the way the street names are given, not really thinking on why and where.
All right, that makes sense. We have a few questions in the Ask a Question. So one is, thank you for the presentation. Are there names honoring living people?
Yeah, good. This is good. So, I saw the name of an actor actually who is a living person, but I have to ask more, like if I can even say the name Altin Basha. I was really surprised he's in his 50s now. So I don't know if it is his name or someone else had the same name and it is a homonym and they did it. So usually they honor people after their death. So all the doctors and engineers, scholars, actually, a lot of people passed away recently. And I think that the new streets will have their names. Like we lost because of COVID a lot of artists and important people in Albania. So I didn't see living people except for 1 or 2 cases when I asked how come this street is named after this person. There were also like few names that honored people who were included in this, corruption and I was surprised. I read even the story how they forced the mayor of this small neighborhood district to name the street after him, and so I don't know how the city council would think about that, but maybe they had to rethink on why they give the name of this person. Leonard Frocco is the name, and I couldn't find the reason behind it.
So another question, how do people react to these changes, especially after the collapse of USSR?
The changes in general of the street names or the changes of like political situation?
This was a question asked by Danielle. Can you clarify what changes? The street name changes?
I can tell you that we never, Albanians, I have to start it this way. We do not know the street names. We get oriented by buildings and institutions. So if you would ask me what is the street name of a street where I would go by every day, I will not know that. we know the main street names. And these 4 street names, like Rruga Durrësit, the street of Durrës, of Elbasan and Kavaja, never change. If you would ask any Albanian today what was the old name, they will not remember it. I asked several people, do you remember the former name of the street of Elbasan? They said, we called it the street of Elbasan. Who knows what is the street name? So, of course, I can tell you that I worked closely with the Association of the Veterans of the War for this presentation, and I received a lot of data about the heroes of the people and martyrs and partisans from them. And of course, they are not pleased to see the names of these people who are considered the enemies of the country. Now, of course, the perspective is different. They were intellectuals who contributed for the liberation war as well, but they were considered enemies. So, but the new generation, they don't know much, unfortunately, about these people. They don't know much about the street names. I started to do a survey asking my students, do you know the story or the name or of your street, and who is this person? They told me no. So I think this might be like another sociological study, or to ask people, like, I can tell you this is related to me. I saw a street name that our street name changed, and it became Congress di Tirana, so the Congress of Tirana. I mean, shame on me, but I never heard of this before, because during communism, the Congress of Tirana, that was a very important event for the education system in Albania, was left out of the historiography because it was considered one Congress that was organized by enemies of the country. So a lot of historical events of Albania were left out of history. So suddenly you see this and you ask yourself, the Congress of Tirana. And when I read more about that, I felt ashamed of myself. But my neighbors asked me also, Congress di Tirana, do you know anything about it? Because the only thing people could remember during communism was the conference of the Communist Party, but it was called the Conference of Tirana. So that's why I got interested in this when we had this change of names. And I mean, from my personal experience, I said, if I don't understand it, or I don't know the street names, what about other people? And especially about people coming from all over Albania to Tirana, it's hard to know who represent what. Or
that's very interesting. There's so much potential for this topic for more research. Yeah. So a couple more questions. Mirko says, thank you, Linda, for your presentation. Are there similar naming and renaming practices and patterns elsewhere in Albania?
Yes, while I was working on this, I saw that this happened also in different cities. Of course, for example, in Kukës, in northern Albania, even the cities. I can give you this as an example. During the communist regime, one city in Albania was named after Stalin, Qyteti Stalin, city of Stalin. And of course, when the communist regime collapsed, the city name changed back to Kuchova, the previous city. Recently, we have another place. This is Ura Vajgurore, so let's say the oil bridge. The inhabitants of this small place would like to call it Dimal, which is related to the Illyrian tribes of Partini in the ancient times, and they are pushing toward it, so they would like to change it. So it happened with all the names of the communism. For example, I wanted to give this as an example. I was surprised to see that they named the street after Zhelyev, who was the leader of Bulgaria and during the process of democratization of Bulgaria. And I was surprised. I said, why do we have to name a street after Zhelyev, a Bulgarian, and not after whatever? It could be a Hungarian leader. We have also Hungarian leaders from the Middle Ages. So it is still going on as a process.
Okay, and then our last question in the chat here, it's actually a question I had as well. Are there still names that connote historical or current activity on the street, such as Silver Street?
From the list that I saw, no. All the names of the streets, like this city, like the family names, but not really this silver name or streets like this. No, I wanted actually to do a lot of statistical data about that, but it was really long and only 20 minutes of presentation. So, but if it's of interest, of course, I will continue working on that.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. Thank you to our
Thank you so much for having me.